Hello, Jacques and Roxanne. How are you doing today?
We're doing great, thanks. Glad we got this worked out. We're going to play a lecture called Bridging Nations. It's about 35 minutes, then we'll start. We appreciate everybody showing up, so we'll get right at it.
In talking to people about the Venus Project, it depends on how heavily they're indoctrinated as a nation, as individuals. Sometimes you face the same problem that Afro-Americans might face in going to a Ku Klux Klan meeting, trying to give them their side or their point of view, which would be almost impossible. Any indoctrinated nation that gets behind the government has been propagandized for a long time. Therefore, you may not be able to reach them. But there are few people you might be able to reach. And if you can reach them, you have to form a separate group because you haven't got the time to work on people for years. Because if you still have difficulty with that, it's like a Jewish group going to a Nazi meeting, trying to share values. The Nazis have already been conditioned not to accept their values. And they've been conditioned to assign a name to them, communist, socialist, that their odds are enormous. So what I suggest is that you get people together that understand this, that are halfway there. And if you wish to try to reach them, you might use such examples as, if you go to war, you will build cumulative hatred over the years and will require the same problems over and over again. Sabotage, assassinations, over and over again. This is the history of civilization. We have to depart from that if we wish to put an end to sabotage, extremism. You have to present it as a system. If they can't understand it, you can't twist their wrist. That's what you're stuck with. You're stuck with victims of culture, and they become patriotic just as other people have in the past, and they've killed in the name of their own country. To have countries divided, if you had any nation that had real freedom, there'd be so many divisions in that nation that you could not develop a coherent nation. That's why they use patriotism, to get people aligned to the system and be suspicious of any other system. If you fail to make contact with people, you don't want to blame yourself. It's years of indoctrination. All you can do is attempt to reach them. Here's the basis for reaching them. If you continue along the same lines, you will develop, which I mentioned just before, hatred over the years. If not immediately, they'll remember you killed their parents and their brothers and sisters. So years later, when they're in a position, if they are, they will create more problems. If you wish to put an end to problems, this is the approach you use. If you don't want war, poverty, hunger, you cannot accomplish that in a monetary system because there's gain. And patents deprive other people of ideas. When all people are provided for, when all nations have access to the same resources or limited resources, we count upon technology. They've always solved every problem they set out to do, which is unfortunate. They made atom bombs. But that was the assignment given. The assignment technicians were given to make a motor vehicle, and they did. The assignment technicians were given to get to the moon. They accomplished it. They have never been given the assignment of eradicating war, poverty, hunger. They've never been given that assignment. If you can present that to technicians first, and if the technicians accept that idea of sharing resources and that all people need the same thing, clean air, food, a relevant education, if you can't get that across the technicians, then unfortunately, you'll have to face the consequences. Now, if people beat each other to a pulp, so that their lands are contaminated, they can't live. You can't do anything about that. That's the nature of years of indoctrination. The notion that you can reach anybody, yes, if you have the time and the money for films and the constant seminars about human behavior and taking away nationalism, religion, you have to take all those things away. If you can't take them away, then some people become God's chosen people, or the master race. And everybody likes to be part of the master race. Everybody likes to be God's chosen people. The Catholics, the Lutherans, the Seventh-day Adventists, all of these people really believe in their system. Besides, they're not so broad in scope and well-read as to handle the introduction of new ideas. So you have to take that into consideration. Whom are you talking to? Do they understand the words you use? If you use examples, they'll say, well, you're an idealist. The world has always had war. There'll always be war, and that we've got to defend ourselves. Or we as Polacks have been invaded. We as Jews have been invaded. The Africans have been exploited. The Africans can't approach their slave masters and say, look, why don't you treat us as human beings? We're people just like you. We love our kids. The slave masters would give up their economic positions of advantage if they did that. And the North could not compete with the South if they used slaves. If the North had to pay their help, they just can't compete. So there's no reason for the North to do anything else but what they do. There's no reason for the South to free the slaves, so they had to use armament, a war, to get that across. And that we can contaminate the earth so badly that people may say, well, I guess we humans are incapable of solving problems. I don't know whether these problems can be solved any more than you do. If you share the land, you're more apt to have cooperation. Otherwise, you'll have constant intrusion and constant assassinations. You have to think about that, not merely that, hey, we've been abused for years. If we don't build an army and protect ourselves, no one else will. This is a philosophy that's easy to build a big following. If you don't protect, if you're a member of the Boo-Boo tribe, and people tend to invade your tribe, if you don't bring the Boo-Boos together and get them to hate or dislike the people that are invading their tribe, that's a constant system. In order to change things, you have to eventually overcome the doctrines of religion, because they do separate people. And if you can't do that, you might be able to do it on a minor basis. I don't know that. You have to judge that by how heavily they are indoctrinated. Now you, as an Israeli, if you went to meet a member of the Ku Klux Klan, they don't like the Jews. And you can't talk to them. The reason you can't talk to them is they don't have the background to understand your language. But if you come as a Jew and you convert to Christianity, then they will look upon you as suspicious, but then later, if you really behave as a Christian, they'll accept you. After all, what is a Jew? Somebody made a speech when people believed in many different gods, and they followed them. They became called Jews. Then a guy with a short beard, a rabbi, I believe, named Christ, or Jesus Christ is what they called him, as possibly based on some Christian from India that taught them some concepts of God. If they followed him, they were called Jews. Follow another person, they're called Christians. Another guy makes a speech, they become Mohammedans. But let's operate on the assumption that God made everybody. So what are you killing them for? They're God's products. If you can save them and say, let's work together, rebuild the earth, share our resources, that's what God wanted amongst ourselves. But if you separate, you're preparing people for hatred and war. That's all I can say to you. I can't give you, say, well, if you do this, everything's going to work out all right. I don't know how it'll work out. I know that when I speak to people, I can get them a little bit toward the center of the viewpoint. But it depends on how heavily indoctrinated they are. If they're too heavily indoctrinated, don't waste your time. Here's how you can tell a sincere person, a religious person. If he says, you don't believe in God, what is the basis? How did all this come about? Then you attempt to explain it. You attempt to explain how nature works. If they can't understand it, come at them another way. Say that a tree hit by lightning doesn't always fall on a person. If it does, it's easy for the chief or the witch doctor to say, you see, the evil forces won out. And if people are brought up to evil forces and concepts like that, it's easy to understand. It's very difficult to understand an integrated society. Because to say, what? If a person isn't a Jew, he doesn't understand the Jewish problems. If you're not a Gentile, remember, they used to feed Christians to lions. Tell them that. They used to feed Christians to lions because they believed the Christian was wrong. There was more than one God. Because the Romans were brought up to believe in many different gods. And this guy comes to town telling people there's only one God. He's blaspheming against all the other gods. So you got indoctrination, which is a heavy problem. But you can convince people that they're victims of culture, their own culture, that the indoctrination was to maintain stability in that culture, which obviously does not work. Over the centuries, man has gone to war. Think of all the Jews who were killed, and all the Christians that were killed, and all the women that were burned as witches that advocated as some difference in point of view. So you're dealing with a point of view that's very different. And you have to take into account their background. And if they're very old, the probability of switching is lower. If you get to younger Israelis, not those too heavily indoctrinated that pray at the wall, you're not going to reach them. But there are many Israelis that will ask you, how did life begin? Where did that come from? Give them the scientific explanation as best you can. And you say, well, somebody had to make that. Well, somebody makes floods. Somebody makes floods. Somebody makes earthquakes. That's nonsense. Earthquake is a result of pressures built up under the earth. Now you can say the evil forces made that. Did God make the mosquitoes? No, the devil made that to annoy people. Well, who made the devil? Where did he come from? Well, God made it. Good and evil. There's always good and evil. That balanced out the questions and the assumptions of why some people behave badly, instead of saying they grew up in an environment that was not reinforcing to their behavior or not rewarding to their behavior. And so they joined a group that protected them. The Israelis protected Israelis. Nobody else protected them. The Israelis had to fight. When the Nazis began to pick on the Jews, they asked the U.S. to intervene. U.S. refused. All nations refused to help them. So they work up a schedule called God helps those that help themselves. That's what leads you to that. When you ask for help and you don't get it, the philosophy that God helps those that help themselves is a workable one and a challenging one. And that's why people follow their own group, because no one else looks after them. No one else cares. Your job is to sell them on that all humanity needs security. All humanity. If you take land away from other people, they don't have water, they will invade or beg for water or do what they can to get water, or they won't give you vegetables if you don't give them water. They will use whatever means they can of the monetary system. The monetary system of itself is corrupt. Now, how do you tell successful people that are doing very well in the monetary system, give it up, there's a better way? They know they've got the best right now. They got a yacht, they got houses, they got a Mercedes, and you to promise them that if other people have access to resources, they already have it, they think. So why should they give it up? You got to take that into account. But you can be wealthy, but you got to put bars on your doors so you won't be invaded by some thief. You also have to take out insurance, life insurance. then you have to put cameras in your house and police protection. If the world has access to all of the Earth's resources, common heritage, there'd be no basis for invasion, except during the transition from the monetary system to the resource-based economy. That's a transition where you don't have all the resources intact, ready to hand out, so you will have trouble. But you must you must take that into account and say, yes, that's a passing stage you must go through in order to arrive at a sane society. Do not attack other people for their customs, their religion, or value. Merely say that truly religious people would understand that the earth was made for the use of all people. Otherwise, you wouldn't have that. You try to give them, in their terms, some acceptable way. And their religion will reflect their culture. And your religion will affect your culture. So all religions must conform to the state that they're in. Otherwise, they would be discouraged or fought against. You have to take all those things into consideration. So you start out without attack. The only thing you attack is the destruction of the environment, which every living form depends on. Food, clothing, shelter, clean water. And the only thing that seems to solve problems is the methods of science applied to problems, not to military systems. When you use science to make better weapons, you're only building negative retroaction for the future. If you use science to research and cultivate the land and restore the damaged lands, the damaged rivers, the polluted areas, if you use science and technology for that, that affects the common good. If you use science to protect your nation, you're using the best brains in America, or the best brains in Israel, or the best brains in Germany to make weapons, to preserve the culture. And they're afraid if another country invades, they're going to take away our religion and our culture. That's been happening all through time. That's always been that way. Now the point is, you're entering a new direction, a new dimension of social and environmental integration. That's the toughest job ever put upon man, because most people just want to solve their own little problems. But to solve problems on a global scale, nothing else is worth fighting for. Even if you fight for your own nation and you achieve some degree of safety, some degree of security, there'll be other nations arming to get at you sooner or later with their own systems. But if you invite people in, if they detect that you're not inviting them in to take their resources away, that you have to prove to other people. You have to prove that you come in peace. You do not come as an American or as a Swede or as an Israeli. And you can't give all nations the rights and practices that they have had, because they get them into trouble. So we have to outgrow the limiting factors, such as traditions that make us appear very different from the other people. But if we have a common goal, such as restoration of the environment, use science and technology to feed more people and build better and more secure houses, and render services to other nations, meaning if they have an earthquake, help them out, those that are not ready to join, to demonstrate that you come as a friend, that you don't come to build a new city or bomb them out or take their resources. That's what you have to convince people. So when people come here to the Venus Project tour, they seem to accept the sincerity of the delivery of this information. They don't say, well, Fresco's got a big castle in Spain, he's got 2 yachts, and all that sort of thing. They know that, they realize that if they don't work together, they'll destroy each other. And that is it. If you can't find a method of working together, that's up to you to read on different methods of converting other people. And I found the best method is the environment. The air we breathe, we all breathe the same air. We all want houses that are secure. And if we build armaments we're going to spend our best brains and our best resources on killing and loss and damaging the environment. War is very damaging to the environment. I'm sure any group of people will understand that if you talk to them about it. Say, all right, so you lost 3 sons, but you got your freedom. Is that what you want? Then next year you're going to have to lose some more sons and daughters. And this goes on and on without end. If you can't get that across to people, then our nation is doomed. I'm not the guy that says, well, if you work hard enough, you can attain it. I'm not an idealist. I'm a dirty realist. And if you want a better world, you have to get up off your ass and make it better. It's a tough job. That's why most people conform. It's much easier to be like other people than to be advocate a new direction. That's why most people do not invent things, and most people do not advocate a new direction, because they lose the context they have. They're obscure, they are rejected. There's so much rejection in being different, and sometimes you're assassinated. Gandhi was different, they assassinated him. They assassinate many people, but they rarely assassinate guys like Hitler, because their indoctrination is so heavy, they don't want anybody to get near Hitler. But if he begins to lose the war, then even the Germans think in terms of getting rid of him. And if the Israelis collapse, then a new type of Israeli will come into existence. But not until the Israelis collapse as a system, saying, we're Jews, we're God's chosen people. You can't do that. You can't say that to other people. You can say, this is an ego trip. You have to point it out. And that's the best I can say for you. I'm sorry if it doesn't answer your questions. What I'd like you to do is put down another frame, ask me how you might handle a certain type of person. But I think they can all be handled in terms of the environment, the well-being of all people. Until you attain that, you will always have war and trouble and rumors of war. But if you don't deal with the problem, you'll have no change. And if you deal with the problem, you have a tough fight ahead. If you don't understand why people conform, they've got a house and they've got a car, and you're talking about a world that doesn't exist. And it's never been that way. There never has been a stable society in the history of civilization. That's why they're suspect of what you're talking about. So realize all those things and then decide what you want to do. Do you want to conform or do you want to take on the job? I take on the job because I see no sense in conforming to the American way of life or the Swedish way of life or the French way of life. I see no sense in it. I see utter collapse in war as a continuous process. That's why I do not align myself with any particular nation. I'm a citizen of the world. I love nature and the earth, and I believe I'd like to take care of the rivers, the oceans, for the good of all people, and myself. Otherwise, if I have children, they'll be bombed out. I have no security in this type of me-for-myself world. And that's where most nations have gotten real tight about, to keep our nation free. And that's something you have to take on. Either you take on or conform. Now, what do you care about women's rights if you're a male? You're earning a living, and you know women don't understand technical things anyway, because they're brought up not to. But when women become able and more able to handle a broader range of things, rather than become ornaments in the world that men display, you have to take on that problem. You have to bring it up continuously. Then you have to show women that operate racing cars, women that operate airplanes. You have to show men that women can do things if given the opportunity to do so. That took many, many years. Nobody met a male group and talked to them and said, yeah, that's right, let's employ women and give them the same wage scale men get. There's no advantage to that. You understand? You can't abuse women. That's why men open the door, because they're a little stronger. That's why men pay for things, because they earn more. When very few women say, I'd like to have dinner with you, Joe. I'm taking you to dinner. Or I'm buying you a car for Christmas. Very few women are in that economic position to do that. And as long as we keep them there, we have an advantage over women. If you don't keep them there, they will become more difficult to deal with. The more women know, the more difficult to deal with. Do you understand that? If women just cook for you and take care of the baby, you tell them what to do and they do it. And the Bible says, obey your husband. Makes it much easier. Obey the boss. And they say, well, what if your country goes to war and the war is unjust? The church says that they will be responsible when they get to heaven. They will be judged. So you go to war if your country wants you to go to war. But the problem would be from the leaders. So you're not to blame. They've come up with that, or you've heard that abuse. They must come up with answers. Answers that satisfy people that are not that well informed. That's the answer. It's not the answer they want. Like, how do you go over the Klan and turn them around? You got to take a month and a half and you got to play it like a game of chess. You know, you make a move, then you make another move. You come at it until you say if your family was raised by blacks, your little boy would speak like a black man. If that's all he is, or a Frenchman. That's easy to get across. Use those examples. If I took a Jewish boy and raised him in the Nazi culture, and he never saw anything else, he'd be a Nazi. If I raised a Jewish boy in Germany under Hitler, he'd be that way. If I raised him in Australia, he'd speak like an Australian. You must understand that, and if you can't understand that, talk to Jews that were born in Australia. Talk to Jews that were born in Germany. Talk to Jews that were born in France. They speak just like a Frenchman and behave just like a Frenchman. The only difference they say is I'm Jewish, which is a small part of their French upbringing. They're still patriotic Frenchmen. You understand that? Okay. That's all I can do for you. I'd like to say, all you have to do is this, and they turn around. They don't. It's like taking a woman and say, stop walking and moving like a woman. You won't attract men. Women practice walking a certain way. You know, when they move and they walk with one foot in front of the other, especially models. And so they have to walk a club foot or flat foot. You can't get a job as a model. So you have to walk a certain way. You have to one foot in front of the other. And they behave like a woman. And that turns a male on. But if a woman sits down and contradicts a male constantly in theories and methods, he loses his dominance. So it was better in the old days, where you ordered your women and children to go out and work on the farm. After all, that's why people had children. They didn't deliberately say, I'll have children to work my farm equipment. It's inherent in the culture that your children, as you get older, take care of you financially. They wheel you to a hospital or in a wheelchair, and people realized the benefits of children. They came to visit them, but they were different. That each generation changed. Said, well, you know, the old man was brought up in Italy, or the old man was brought up in Israel. That's the old values. The old values will continue as long as the soap operas and traditions are kept alive. We have to build new patterns, new soap operas, new stories, so the old people do not become traditionally hooked to old values. If you don't do that, you're going to have the same problems. How can I say you won't have them? If you have the same traditions as Christmas, if you have the same old traditions, you're perpetuating the old cultures. And with the old cultures come war, starvation, poverty, and differential advantage. So when a person says, I'm interested in change, how much change? And are you willing to give up your religion and let others have their religion? Or what kind of change are you interested in? You'll never not get an answer from people. Say, well, I think we ought to change in accordance with the times. Ask them how, and how much change, and what that consists of. And what do you do with people that want old traditions? You either have to condition their kids to change something, or some group of that people. But we can get a lot of Lutherans, a lot of Catholics, and a lot of Jews interested in the Venus Project, and Germans. That they have in common, and they go to meetings, and they talk about the Venus Project. When the guy says, what about religion? You can talk about yourselves about that. The Venus Project is interested now in saving the earth and all people, and providing water and food. Just stay with that. The guy said, what if a guy wants to believe in boo-boo tree? He can believe in the boo-boo tree as long as he advocates preservation of the environment and understanding that all people are conditioned products. You can get that across if you ask a Jew, why do you send your kid to Hebrew school? And you ask a Catholic, why do you send your kids to Catholic schools? Because I'm afraid they may be indoctrinated elsewhere by other people. So I want to secure their Catholicism. I want to secure their Hebrew values by sending them to a Hebrew environment. Or a pilot who trains his kid to be an aviator wants to secure his environment. Or a scientist training his kid. A scientist believes in freedom because he's brought up to believe in freedom. I don't believe in freedom. I believe in the presentation of knowledge to preserve, take care of the environment, and learn how to relate to one another. I don't know what the word freedom means. Does freedom mean you can do anything? So not knowing what it means, I know what I mean when I say we must protect the rivers, the oceans, and one another if we're to survive. If we fail to do that, we will have negative effects in the future. What about minorities and differences that nations have between them? If the differences fortify militarism, aggression, those differences have to be monitored, changed, updated, not destroyed, updated. Maybe they don't serve the function that they pretend it serves. People says if you don't protect yourself, there'd be no protection. It might be in the world of individuality, that might be true. But in a collective world, that is not true, and that's not the philosophy they talk about. Just tell them again, it's much easier to conform than to be different. That's why most people conform. Those that don't suffer. They lose their jobs, they're ridiculed, they have rotten eggs thrown at them, they're beaten up as free thinkers, as non-Christians or non-Jews. That's why most people conform, because it's painful when you don't conform. To say, you're a member of our church, we don't associate with the people out here, so they don't get a chance to say that. Some of them do. You say, no, only if you've got the time, you go to work on it and take their religion away as gently as you can. You're really not taking it away. You're showing them other possible alternatives. And as a possible alternatives for humanizing society, this is a better alternative than nationalism or religion. Religion never achieved peace on earth and goodwill to all people. It never achieved that. That's why you want to change it. If it achieved those things, fine, nothing the matter with it. And prayer seems to be insufficient because Jesus said, by their work you shall know them, meaning what they do is the only thing that counts. Now you can use that quote from the Bible. Jesus did say that. I don't know what he meant by that. I'm not sure he did. But I'm sure that you know what I mean when I say if we don't take care of the environment, we will lose it. Okay.
Okay.
I would say that most that's a good spiel.
Okay. If anybody has any questions related to this, we would like to hear it. Thanks. Can the city model be applied for a smaller population? Would that be a better way to get some results faster? Population example, 20,000 people.
Yes, it would be. Any start would be better than no work at all along those lines.
I know a couple of politicians, and I wonder how we can approach them to a resource-based economy.
I don't think you can. I think they have to fail. The public has to lose confidence in the people they elected. Only under those conditions will they be looking for something new. It doesn't pay to talk to politicians. They usually don't understand science or technology. So I think you would have to inform them. It would take a long time, and they would be ousted, because if they change their values without the other politicians changing their values, it becomes very difficult. The chances are that a sane man would never be elected to government leadership.
The same question goes on, would it be reasonable to bring up technocracy so that I and the politician have a kind of common ground? Is this a politician who's a technocrat? I haven't even seen a politician that's a technocrat.
No.
Not today, anyway. Maybe in Europe. Common ground, work around. Oh well, okay. Yeah, I'd like to hear if this politician is a technocrat or in some other country. That would be interesting. How do you feel about what happened to Nikola Tesla?
I feel he was abused by Edison, because he threatened Edison's values. He threatened Edison's economic system by advocating alternating current. So Edison was protecting himself.
Do you think music has a lot to do with cultivation of society?
No, it has nothing whatsoever to do with cultivation of society.
Is there a difference between mechanistic concept of life and one that is deterministic?
No, not really. If you sit down and discuss it, I think determinism is a form of a mechanistic point of view. By mechanistic, I mean that you can't twist your arm to the right unless there's a muscle that does that. That you can't get up and walk unless you have musculature to do that. That plants do not grow. They depend on sunlight, temperature, soil conditions, moisture. They depend on many interacting variables. That there's no single cause for human behavior. There are many interacting variables that shape human behavior.
Somebody's asking if you've heard from Lou Merlin lately from the Klan. Is he still not a racist?
No, he's dead. He died many years ago.
He was much older than you at the time?
He was older than me at the time, yes.
And not many people that are older than you now. Is there... Okay, let's see, we've taken that. Do you think that... Okay, we've taken that. This thing about Coney 2012, I just described this to Jacques. I didn't show him the video, so I guess it's more appropriate to show him the video if you want him to answer about it. When the war interests are using YouTube, oh, okay, I guess this person is, well, I'll show him that video and I'll talk about this with him, but I know what you're talking about. A lot of people think that film Coney 2012, or not a lot of people, but several people think that that this is just advocating war for young activists that are easily influenced by that. Okay, this person is asking Jacques if the mechanistic concept of life is compatible with quantum mechanics.
It depends on your interpretation of quantum mechanics. All that mechanism says that there's nothing that's self-activated, that a sailboat cannot sail. It's acted upon by the wind. That a ball does not roll down a hill. It's pulled down by gravity. All things are affected by different forces. It means that there's no self-generating unit that can generate its own energy without being fed. Human beings have to eat vegetables or animal tissue in order to grow. If they don't eat or consume life, they will die. All that a mechanistic system states is that things are not self-operating. A useful person depends on their education, how much they know about the physical world. And the more exposure they have to different systems, the broader their frame of reference. A person that just lived in Weehawken County, New Jersey, and never left that county can only remain a Weehawkenite. You have to be exposed to many different things in order to evaluate things. If you're just exposed to the Lutheran point of view, you don't have a broad enough frame of reference to engage in conversation about other forms and other viewpoints.
Do you think music can help promote the Venus Project?
No, it cannot.
I think it can, in terms of getting the message out there to certain people or introducing them to the Venus Project through music, through the words.
Well, music, when used in combination with other things, yes, but music alone cannot alter people's values.
I see what you mean. Since the Venus Project has no prisons and no police, how would people who commit socially offensive behavior be apprehended?
There's no need to commit socially offensive behavior. If people have access to the necessities of life, they do not steal. If they had food, clothing, housing, and a relevant education, there's no need to offend anyone. Aberrant behavior is generated by scarcity or lack of opportunity.
How do you see that, like within the transition?
I see trouble within the transition. I see people projecting their own values into the Venus Project and hating certain aspects of it due to the fact that they're brought up differently. The transition will be painful. I never said anything otherwise.
If there is a democratic way to help make a resource-based economy, could I contact anyone to explain my ideas?
Yes, write to the Venus Project.
No, I think, well, I'm not sure exactly what this question means. Are you talking about getting in touch with politicians? I don't know what you mean by democratic way to help make a resource-based economy. Having people vote on it?
We feel that information is necessary. The word democratic does not impart any particular kind of information. We have no reference for the word democracy.
Oh, I guess you're asking if you can contact us. Could I contact anyone to explain my ideas?
Yes, you can.
You can write to meadows@thevenusproject.com if you want to further explain that. Do you think it's a good idea to invest all the time in learning about general semantics first by reading Science and Sanity? It seems to me that this view of general semantics gave you, Jacques, a foundation to start on. Would it take too long?
Well, many semanticists have different interpretation, which is unfortunate. General semantics gives you some principles to work with, but it doesn't touch the economic system. It plays safe.
If I cannot sign the NDA form to join the Venus Project team, yet have a more efficient design for a part of the Venus Project city that still adheres to the complete functional design. Do you see any of the... If you want to, if this person is asking if they can question things about the city, if they don't want to sign the NDA, if you want to talk to us directly, I mentioned my email address, meadows@thevenusproject.com, if you want to talk about anything in particular regarding the city design. We're all for hearing it. If someone says you can't get everyone to agree on this or any one point of view, how do you reply?
And most people don't know how their government works. Most people have no idea how their telephone works, or their washing machine, or their electric light. So you don't need everybody to know everything. You need enough people that can maintain the social operation. That's all you need. You don't need everybody to be sympathetic. It doesn't take the knowledge of everybody to understand sociology. But the more people that do, the better the nation. The better informed people are, the better relationships. To the degree that people do not understand their culture, you have threatening situations.
What does Jacques and Roxanne do during their leisure time? We don't have any leisure time. We're always working.
We read whatever we can read and to keep up with new ideas, or we work on problem solving.
I mean, even when we're driving, we're listening to tapes or something that's interesting. You've mentioned that you've spoken before to B.F. Skinner over the telephone. What did you talk about with him?
I asked him if he believed that human beings were a kind of a physical, chemical, electrical mechanism. He said at the time it was too early to answer that question. He doesn't have enough experience in that area.
And this person's asking, did you talk about the ideas behind a resource-based economy?
No, I did not, because I would have to meet him in person and answer a lot of questions. I tried to set that up, but at the time it was not possible for him to get away.
Who do you think has been the most innovative person within the field of psychology?
No one yet. No one really touches, or that I know of, that touch the socio-economic influences on human behavior. If you're brought up in a culture like the Nazi culture, you produce more aberrant behavior. Therefore, the psychologists conform to culture. When a psychologist adjusts a person to a given culture, they're not scientific. A well-adjusted person in the economic system we have today would be considered maladjusted in a sane society.
We're just a couple minutes away. I don't see any other questions. And I think we're not going to go over time today because we have a tight deadline to get this documentary to the musician. She has 1 or 2 more days to work on it. So we're going to just cut out a couple minutes early and thank everybody for showing up.
Yes.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity for answering questions.
We're working hard on this documentary, and very shortly, within a day, I think, we'll be able to get it to the linguistics team, Sue. So watch out for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're really pushing hard. It'll be a late night tonight.
How long after submitting it to the linguistic team do you plan on having it released online?
I don't know. I don't know how quickly they can do it. I guess we'll check after we get it to them, see how many we can get out.
Well, as I understand, we're going to receive it with the transcription in English done already, so that will save us a lot of time. Plus, from the experience that we've had before when we had to do Moving Forward, which was almost, what was it? It was 2 hours, 40 minutes, something like that, and we did it in 3 weeks. So this video, which is 52 or 56 minutes long, we should be able to do it in a lot less time than that. We already have a good few people who are very interested in translating it, so I think it's going to be done. We'll definitely do it as fast as we possibly can, but as well as we possibly can. So, because it really does deserve to get out there with good translations, first of all, so that we don't get other people from outside the team jumping on it and making all sorts of weird and wonderful translations that have got nothing to do with what's being said.
Are you looking to release the film online once you've got, say, the top 10 languages done, or the top 5 or something, or are you going to wait until sort of all the different languages are done?
I don't know. I can't answer that, but I can mention it to Ray. When we've finished here, I'll nip into the Skype group with the admins and say what Roxanne has just said. They'll be very, very happy to know that. Then I can get back to you through Skype as well, if you're going to be around on Skype.
Yeah, we'll do. Great, thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think we should have it locked down, the text, and like I said, today or tomorrow, so I'll send it right over to you.
Excellent. People will be very relieved to know that we're going to be able to work on it before it's released. It's something that's been worrying a lot of us. It's not just me that's the nag.
It's been a lot of pressure on me too, getting it all together. And the editor,
I imagine.
the final editor still has a little bit he's got to do, so it might all work out at the same time. So that'd be
Right.
Okay, everyone, thanks again.
Thank you again for the opportunity, and thanks for all the work you've done to help this project.
Yes, we really do want to thank everybody for that. We're just so appreciative of all that help.
Yes, thank you guys very much, and we'll see you next week.